right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining our event today, Connect East. We have a great agenda ahead of us. My name is Sarah Smythe and I lead our field and partner marketing team here at Qumulo, and I will be your MC for today's event. First, we'll hear from our VP of Product, Ben Gittenstein, with an introduction to Qumulo. After Ben wraps up, you'll be hearing from one of our customers, Eric Tomio, Systems Administrator from the University of Florida, on how they use Qumulo. This portion of the event will be an interview between Ben and Eric. And lastly, we'll bring on our systems architect, Pascal Filion, who will then be followed by a Q&A. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording this webinar and you will be sent a copy after the event. Please feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen to ask questions if you have any along the way, and be sure to direct them to both the panelists and the attendees. We will be selecting 2 people at random who ask questions via the chat to win a prize after the event, and the winners will be emailed on Monday. Lastly, all attendees will receive a complimentary $30 Uber Eats voucher. Expect that in your inbox before the weekend. All right, that's it for me. Ben, over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me, and thanks for joining us, all the rest of us on the team here. Welcome to Connect East. This is actually the 4th or 5th of these that we've done. We're doing these regional events all around the country, actually all around the world. We did some in Asia as well. And they're a super exciting way for me as someone who works in product here at Qumulo and the rest of our team to connect with you, our existing customers and new folks just learning about the company. And as well for me to get a chance to spend time with one of my favorite people in the world, Eric, who's an existing Qumulo customer, somebody who I think really highly of, but also who I think is like emblematic of what makes Qumulo awesome, which is the customers that use our products. So I'm Ben Gittenstein. I run product here at Qumulo. I've been with the company for about 6 years, and I'm going to take you a little bit through our sort of vision, our way we see the world, and what our product does and why we built the product that we built. And then I'll jump into a conversation with Eric and turn it over to Pascal after that, so you can actually see the product in action. So let's get started. At the heart of our vision for the world and our product vision is really a central problem, which is the value and growth of unstructured data itself. So all of you are here because for some reason or in some way, unstructured data isn't the data that is about your business. It is the data that runs your business. Your business is in some way built on taking unstructured data and doing something amazing with it. The problem, though, is that data is growing faster than the resources that are available to manage and use it. What that functionally means is that the machines that create data, the sensors, the cameras, the human beings, the sequencers, the electron microscopes, even just the number of PCs and devices that create unstructured data, those things are multiplying rapidly. And the density of the data that they are creating is growing immensely. So what used to be rare, a 4K camera, is now quite commonplace. What used to be rare, a sensor that created a terabyte of data in a day, is now quite common. So it's not just the number of devices creating data, it's the density of the data they create is growing really, really fast. But the resources available to manage that data are not growing at the same pace. I was just looking at some data from IDC, which is a firm that does sort of market sizing data for our world. And they project that the rate of data growth is about 4x the rate of resources or budget for managing data. That's just unsustainable. And that creates real problems for all of you. Because at its heart, that technology problem becomes a people problem. And as a person and as managers of organizations full of people, those people problems become very real and very personal. You have to start thinking about the future. Hey, did the platform bet that I made a couple years ago, is that platform gonna make it through this historic systemic change? Will it meet my future needs? Or am I going to have a really complex people problem of re-architecting how I've set up my entire organization? The growth of data outpacing my budget leads to, is one of the central problems therein is the storage systems that that are built for that environment, those storage systems no longer can keep pace with the way that data is growing, which leads to complex and difficult to manage systems. Of course, you're working with legacy vendors in that environment, and that's really, really frustrating, particularly whenever you have a question or an issue. So, you're getting frustrated with the support experience. If you're going to manage big growing data sets with fixed resources, you can't use old methods. You need intelligent infrastructure to do that, which means that you need AI and ML not just to serve it as a workload, but you need AI and ML in your storage infrastructure so that you can keep pace with its growth. And then, of course, the rise of the public cloud. Well, one of the reasons that data growth is going up so fast is because we are all adopting the public cloud in some form, either as a place where primary work is done, or as an enabler of global collaboration, or just as a place to store backups and make sure you have a good DR strategy. Well, one of the ways that shows up for all of us is that our boss comes to us and says, it's time to we have a cloud mandate. It is time to get started in the public cloud. And your vendor is either telling you, your storage vendor is either telling you, you have to go all in on the cloud right now because we're 100% cloud, or the cloud is nonsense, don't do it at all. And so now you can't go to the cloud on your terms and at your pace. And then finally, and this is why I keep talking about people, is because to me, people is sort of the most important part of this problem. You as IT administrators or as leaders of IT organizations are just stretched too thin. If that data growth continues to outpace the budgets that support it, well, then at the end of the day, you just don't have the ability to sustainably hire and retain people because you're asking too much of them. And that's just, again, not sustainable. We will know, none of us will make it if we continue to live in that environment. Something has to change. So that's why Qumulo was born. Qumulo was fundamentally created to build a unified file data management platform where the growth of data outpacing the growth of resources is no longer an existential crisis. It can become just a part of our daily lives. How do we do that? Well, the first way we do that is we enable you to run on the hardware of your choice in your data center. Why does that matter? Because hardware choice, it turns out, drives scale and economics. And if we can provide great software that runs on the hardware that you want to use, then you can, and on non-proprietary hardware, then you can get the best innovation, particularly in cost economics and scale economics, from the hardware ecosystem. World-class customer support is built into our product and into our culture. Now, I know every vendor says some version of that, but one of the things that's really important to understand about the Qumulo experience is that as a Qumulo customer, you get a dedicated chat channel. We happen to use Slack, but you get a dedicated chat channel with a storage professional, usually a former sysadmin, who knows our product really well and who has been in a role like yours or your team's. And you don't file tickets to get questions asked. You don't have to escalate. You just jump onto Slack, ask a question, and we answer it. And it's fast and easy, and it's delightful. We enable a true hybrid cloud story. So what that means functionally, and Pascal's actually going to show you a fair amount of this in action, is that the same software that we build for your on-premises data center is what runs in our public cloud. And anywhere that Qumulo runs in a certified supported way is a valid data movement target. So our data movement technologies will enable you to move data from any Qumulo location around the world, across clouds, within clouds, data center to cloud, cloud to data center. And then let's talk about the cloud journey. Well, because we run natively in the public cloud as software, your cloud migration, and because that software is, by the way, the same as what runs on premises, migrating to the public cloud is much less risky. If your workload works against Qumulo in your data center, it will work against Qumulo in the public cloud. That plays right into the lack of re-architecting. So one of the main problems with adopting the public cloud for unstructured data workloads is that if that unstructured data workload or unstructured data started on premises, it's almost always a file-based application with file-based workloads. Well, if you go to the public cloud, you're often going to be told you need to rewrite that thing for object. That's expensive, time-consuming, and doesn't make the application any better. With Qumulo, you don't have to do that. Just if the workload works on premises with file, it will work in the public cloud. So you don't need to re-architect it. And then of course we have the same, let's talk about scale. Like the workloads we support tend to get really big. They start in hundreds of terabytes and they get to petabytes and sometimes hundreds of petabytes. That same scale promise is just as true in the public cloud as it is on premises. Our mission as a product is to help customers build petabyte scale file data lakes on premises and in the public cloud really simply. We do that with our big strategic partners, AWS in the public cloud, Azure and Google Cloud, and then on premises with Hewlett Packard HPE, Fujitsu, and now Supermicro. That's simply put, that's what we do. We help you build really big cloud file data lakes, and we help you build them in your data center or in the public cloud. What does that mean in practice? So like what actually is Qumulo as a product? Well, let's start with the data lifecycle because we're data people here. We all think a lot about what is unstructured data, how does it move, supporting it, serving it to end users, all of that. That's sort of our life here. We think of unstructured data, and I'm sure you've all seen some version of this lifecycle, or maybe you have this on a whiteboard in your office already, but this is sort of our version of this framework. Like we think of data as going through a lifecycle from ingest to transform, publish, and archive. So ingest is when some device creates unstructured data, a camera, a sequencer, a human, a car with a LiDAR sensor in it, a sensor that's just grabbing and creating log files off of a farming implement. I mean, they're all over the place, these sensors. Then you have transformation. That's where usually some very expensive end user that is really talented and knows what they're doing, often using large scale compute, but sometimes just a really powerful end user workstation, transforms that raw data into something more valuable. Could be a video, could be a discovery, could be some form of analysis or a new piece of content. Then they take that finished product and they publish it out either to other places in the world, or they give access to it to other end users still sitting on the same storage. And finally, the end product is archived, either the raw data or the finished data or some combination of the two. Qumulo Core's fundamental promise, and Qumulo Core, by the way, that's the name for our software. That's what we make. Qumulo Core's fundamental promise is that it's a single data platform for that entire lifecycle. So you can use the same product for ingest, transform, publish, and archive. Qumulo Core, if you crack it open and look under the hood, there are 7 data services that make Qumulo Core powerful. There's scale, Qumulo Scale. That's the technologies we've built that enables us to build really, really big systems that can get really, really fast. Every time you add a node, you add capacity and performance. Speaking of performance, there's Qumulo Perform. So that's a series of intelligent algorithms, basically, that promote data to the hottest media, that analyze your workflow and your IO patterns and determine what data we should accelerate next so that we give you the fastest performance possible. Qumulo Aware, that's actually some of our founding innovation. Qumulo Aware is a set of technologies we built to give you insight into your workloads and your data. So you can understand which of your clients is hitting your storage the hardest, why they're doing that, which of your files are generating the most activity. So you can debug workflows really, really fast and also make better purchasing decisions. Even if that leads to buying less Qumulo, we're fine with that as long as it brings you value. Qumulo Shift, that's a technology we built to enable you to move data as a native object from file, so on any Qumulo system, into Amazon S3. And now, by the way, back. And that enables you to take advantage of public cloud services, but also just to tier that object down. Once you move it into S3, you can put it in Glacier. Qumulo Integrate is our API. Everything we do at Qumulo as a technology company starts with an open RESTful API. So if you, for instance, don't like our UI and you'd like to rebuild it, all the UIs are there for you to take advantage of. But you can use that UI, you can use that API, by the way, to read and write data, but also to fully manage our system. We have many customers actually who never see our UI because they entirely manage their Qumulo clusters using the API. Qumulo Protect is, that's our data protection suite. That's something we're super proud of, mostly because keeping customers' data safe is a central part of our mission. Qumulo Protect includes things like snapshots, so you can protect against user error or an attack. replication so that you can keep safe second copies of your data, so you can have a DR strategy, you can fail over and fail back. And of course, just the fundamental protection against hardware failure. So the way we enable erasure coding and all of the other assistive technologies there. So because we fundamentally know that hardware, as much as we're proud of the hardware partners that we work with, hardware does die and our system is built to be resilient to it. And then finally, Qumulo Secure. Every Qumulo system that you buy and build is encrypted at rest by default for free and with no performance penalty. And that's super valuable from a customer standpoint, because at the end of the day, we live in a pretty scary world when it comes to the data that we serve. That world is one where, you know, our data is really, really valuable and other people know it. And providing encryption at rest, AES 256, it's you know, industry best in class for the level of encryption, but providing that by default to everyone is a value that it just connects deeply with our values, because that we know how important that data is to all of you, and keeping it safe is a first class promise in our product. So where do you run Qumulo Core? That's great. That software is cool and powerful. We're super proud of it. But where can you run it? Well, you can run it in your data center on what we call cloud, or on what we call server queue. So server queue is the name for our hardware partners that we work with. Qumulo does not make or sell any hardware, but we work with these hardware partners to make sure that you have awesome options that are tailored to work really, really well with our software. From HPE, you can buy both an all flash and all NVMe version on their DL line or on their Apollo line, which is a hybrid of flash and disk. Supermicro, we just released our first Supermicro platform. It's awesome. Customers are adopting it really fast, and it's all NVMe. It's 1U. It's really, really fast and got great economics. And then, of course, there's all our products on Fujitsu. All of that is surrounded by Qumulo Care, which is what we talked about earlier. That's the support experience. From a technology standpoint, that means, excuse me, we have predictive monitoring built into the product so that both you and we get really great data about your systems, about their health, about how they're performing. If they're having issues, we often can predict them ahead of time. Well, there's many examples of us calling or slacking a customer and saying, hey, I think drive 4 on node 3 is about to die. You should probably go ahead and swap it out. And then within an hour or two, the drive actually dies, because our systems were able to predict that that drive was starting to look a little funky. And of course, real-time Slack. So that's the system. That's what you get when you buy Qumulo. We haven't talked much about the commercial model, but it's very, very simple. You just sign up and become a subscriber. We come and install the correct product for you if you bought Server Queue or Cloud Queue. And then as a subscriber, you get all of our new updates. We ship new software every 2 weeks, and all of that is just a part of your subscription. So that's the Qumulo Core technology model, and to some degree, our commercial model. Well, speaking of shipping every 2 weeks, the reality of that is that the value of that to you is that as a subscriber, the price that you paid on day 1 of your subscription is the same price you're paying on day 365 or 720 or what have you. But the product has only gotten relentlessly more valuable as you have owned it, and all for the same price. So your value per dollar just went way up through the life of that product. And here you can see just a quick overview of, actually, I joined the company right there at around 2015, of all of the innovation we've delivered in those 6 years. And what's awesome about that picture is that as a customer, you don't pay more for any of that innovation. You're just a subscriber. So when we add Qumulo Shift or at-rest encryption, or we just announced NFS v4.1. As all of those things show up, you just get to use them. They're yours to have. And as a product person, what's really valuable to us is by shipping every 2 weeks, we get to learn deeply from our customers and make sure that we're always building the right thing. So, relentless innovation is great, but the question is, are you innovating in a way that actually creates value for customers? Gartner seems to think that we are, and we're super proud of that. So for the last 4 years, we've been named a leader in Gartner's Magic Quadrant for distributed file and object. That's the Magic Quadrant for our industry. In fact, in this most recent Gartner Magic Quadrant, we were actually named not only a leader, but we are the furthest to the right of anybody in our Magic Quadrant, which is a reflection of our vision that Gartner sort of agrees with our take on the world, that the problems we're out to solve are the most important problems to solve in unstructured data. We're super proud of that, not so much because we want to get pats on the back from Gartner, but because in order to win those places in the Magic Quadrant, Gartner gets to call our customers and they get to look at our business pretty deeply, and they get to really explore our technology products, our support, just our operations, and make sure that they get to really sort of crawl inside us. And they come out the other side and then say, hey, you guys are doing a really good job. And that makes us really proud, because it's actually about the company we've built, not just some presentations to an analyst. Gartner's not the only one to recognize that. We've seen that from other industry analysts too. That's great, that's fine. But the thing that's most important to me as a product person is our customer NPS. Now, again, I am sure that you've all seen a pitch from a vendor who has said, we have a great NPS. And I'm sure they all have some way of saying that. But here at Qumulo, I'll just tell you, this is like a religion for us. So we've had an 89 NPS for the last 11 quarters now. Actually, we just published our newest one. And what's really important about that is its stability. It has just been relentlessly high, even as the customer base has grown, by the way, very fast over those 11 quarters, and globally, and with new hardware partners and new platforms, that that NPS number continues to stay really high and really stable. And that doesn't happen for free. That happens because we focus on what are the problems our customers are having, and how can we make those problems easier, and how can we simplify their lives. And that's something that takes the entire company. It's not just product and engineering, it's our sales team for making sure we're communicating clearly. And of course, our customer success team for working great with customers. So all of that leads to a great NPS. I'm going to talk about a couple of customers, and then I'm going to bring over Eric. And the reason to talk about a couple of other customers beyond Eric is really just so you can get a sense for the breadth of how our products are used. Let's talk a little bit about Dayton Children's. So Dayton Children's is a hospital. It's actually a hospital system. They, like many of the other hospitals and healthcare organizations that use Qumulo, use us to do a couple of things. The first is really about medical imaging, and that's actually the core use case for Dayton Children's and many other hospitals. So I don't know if any of you work at a healthcare organization or run some portion of IT for a hospital, but the reality is that medical imaging is the growth of that data is somewhat insane. I mean, it is just so fast. And it's a great example of not just the number of devices creating medical images, but the density of those images is going way up. And the reality is that old approaches to managing that data just won't keep pace. The problem, of course, is that you, as a hospital, you don't have the choice to not serve that data reliably and well, because you need those medical images to perform surgery, to diagnose a condition, to just provide the services of a hospital. So Dayton Children's uses us to store and to serve that data to their end users, their healthcare professionals. And we're super proud of not only the cost efficiency, the IT management experience we provided, but also the reliability, because that's a situation in which you really can't lose data and you can't go down. And that's something we take super seriously. On the other side of the United States is San Diego Supercomputing Center. So it's actually a system of resources that serve a variety of university centers out in San Diego and in California. It's used by researchers. Qumulo storage is used by researchers throughout SDSC to do lots of different things, to do lots of different kinds of studies and projects. But one of them that we get really interested in is tracking wildfires. So out here on the West Coast, wildfires are a huge problem, especially in the summers. And it's a problem where data can actually really, really help. Getting data from planes that are taking pictures of those fires, from radar, from satellites, and just log data from the devices on the amazing firefighters that are in there fighting those fires. The folks at SDSC, those researchers, can use that data to build models to understand and predict how those fires are going to grow and change, and to scientifically look at which of their remediation efforts and firefighting efforts are having the most impact. They use Qumulo to build those models, both as a storage repository for all of the raw data, but then also to serve the big compute that they do to compute on and transform that raw data into a prediction or to simply analysis of what's happening with the fires. And we're super proud of helping the folks at SDSC do that. And lastly, Cinesite. So media and entertainment was one of our birthing markets. It was where we started. Media and entertainment customers like Cinesite are amazing because they just push storage products like ours so hard. Cinesite is a film producer. They work on cool stuff like The Witcher here, which is a really fun show. If you've ever gotten a chance to see it, it's really cool. I like it a lot. But Cinesite does some amazing stuff. They make amazing content. One of the ways they use Qumulo is they use us both on premises and in AWS. They use Qumulo on premises as a gold copy of their data. So that's where actually a lot of their editorial work is doing. So for those of you not in M&E, you can think of that as like a really, really powerful end user workstation doing really, really, really intense streaming reads and writes against a Qumulo system to create beautiful content. And then they also use us for rendering workloads where you take a big scale out compute farm and you do lots of parallelized reads and writes against a Qumulo system. They do that on premises, but they also occasionally and sometimes quite intensely use us in AWS when their on premises infrastructure isn't big enough to serve their needs, when they need overflow. And so they've gotten actually really huge numbers performance-wise against our product up in AWS, think in the millions of IOPS and, tens to hundreds of gigabytes a second of throughput. And we're super excited to help them create awesome content. Okay, so that's enough from me. I'm going to stop now and I am going to stop presenting here. And I am going to bring on Eric. So Eric, if you want to jump off of mute and turn on your video. Hey, Eric.
Hey, how are you doing, Ben?
Awesome, man. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for coming and thanks for talking about Qumulo for a couple minutes.
Sure.
Why don't you start by just introducing people to the university, what your all's mission is and what you do there and how long you've been there. Just talk a little bit about your organization.
Okay, sure. I am a systems administrator in the research computing department at the University of Florida. I've actually been there a little over 5 years, probably about 5.5 years now. So I manage our high performance computing system. We're actually, you mentioned SDSC. We're basically SDSC for the University of Florida. So we manage a supercomputer here. We have about 60,000 compute cores. We have about 600 GPUs in that cluster. But this year we also added an NVIDIA DGX SuperPod, which contains about 1,120 NVIDIA A100 GPUs. So that's been a major addition and a welcome addition and quite the system to manage. So yeah, I
bet that system is pretty popular with the researchers.
It actually, we ran, I don't know if you guys are familiar, in the HPC world, the top 500 list of top 500 supercomputers in the world. We landed at number 22 with DGX with the SuperPod. So we're pretty proud of that accomplishment for sure. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So between all of the systems we have, when we serve all areas of research, biotech, gene sequencing, RNA, DNA modeling, and then of course, machine and deep learning and AI. So we support pretty much everything.
That's cool.
We've been using Qumulo. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask, actually, before you jump to Qumulo,
sure.
Before you used Qumulo, what did your storage environment look like? What was the landscape like?
Yeah, so we still primarily use Lustre for the parallel file system for the performance. We've always used Lustre, but we had for what we replaced the Qumulo with, we had an Exenta store system, which was a few hundred terabytes. It was just a dual node, highly available setup, and it served the purpose at the time. It mostly was for home user access, and we had some other kind of just distributed data on it for general purpose. But yeah, even that system when we had was underutilized pretty bad, but it was mostly because we were nervous about adding anything to it. We just weren't sure if it was going to stand up to any additional workload. Not to mention upgrades on that thing were disastrous every time. We planned like a full outage for, you know, an upgrade, and inevitably something went wrong. Something didn't work when we came back. So we eventually just said, we're done updating this thing. We just can't do it. It's too fragile. Right. So, I mean, like I said, it served the purpose. It wasn't heavily stressed. And it tried to have a nice dashboard, but it didn't. It was written in Flash, and half the panels never worked. And there were these tacky gauges that I was just like, okay, it was pretty useless. But
got it.
So
got
so
it.
come time to retire, we were looking for something better for sure.
So, well, that leads us to then Qumulo. So what was it about Qumulo that you found interesting? And then what's been your experience using Qumulo since you adopted us?
Yeah, probably. I mean, definitely the key thing that we were looking for was kind of the insight. Like I said, we got kind of tricked into thinking we'd have a dashboard on the previous system. And so we really looked for something, what can show me my data? What can give me any kind of analytics? Give me some nice dashboard. I mean, we write a lot of tools internally running command line stuff, but there's sometimes where it's just easier if someone else has written a nice thing for you. So of course we needed, you know, an NFS type backstore. So we hit the top names, right? We looked at NetApp was out there, EMC, the Isilon was out there. And we started looking around at the time. I think Qumulo was fairly new, but everything we read about them sounded great. So we, you know, put them into the mix of systems we wanted to evaluate. And performance wise, we wanted something that could stand up. We wanted scalability, something where we could just add a node and move on. So those are the features we looked at, and most of them all kind of had it. You know, Isilon wanted to ask for license costs for everything. Qumulo said, hey, we have everything is included, but you know, every feature that we have and will ever have. So yeah, I mean, you know, looking around, just it looked like the best option. We, you know, maybe you were a little nervous, you guys being new to the game, right. But we wanted to jump in, and we wanted something modern, and so we agreed internally that that's the way we want to go.
Well, what's your experience been so far? Have we earned your trust?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Any problem that we had before has pretty much been remedied by this system. Like I said, the dashboard analytics have been great. Performance has been great. And upgrades, of course, I always have to mention upgrades, right? I mean, it's a no-brainer. We do it religiously every quarter. Every 2 weeks, probably a little too fast for us, but I mean, the quarter we have, you know, had no issues. So we've been doing that consistently. And we've been adding a lot to it too. So we started with the same purpose as our previous system, with mostly user home shares. We moved our application directory there. We actually have about 1,500 applications for our researchers. So there's a huge tree, and that all sits on Qumulo as well. We started putting a lot of virtual machines on there. So now it's a virtual disk backing store for our libvirt and KVM VMs. We have about 60 VMs running there now. So we've just been adding and stacking those up. And we added another system called Galaxy to it. It's a research-driven project. A lot of people in that space will be aware, but it's quite large, and it has potential to reach every node in the cluster. So yeah, I think that's awesome. Yeah, those have been great.
Do you want to talk, just since you mentioned upgrades, I'm sure if I was a newcomer, you know, somebody new to learning about Qumulo and heard us talk about shipping software so frequently, even hearing you upgrade every quarter, like talk a little bit about the upgrade experience. What do you do? What's it like for you? Talk about that a little bit.
So we've originally, we didn't really believe it, right? That it was going to be so easy, to be quite honest. And we try to write documentation for everything, but I was like, guys, literally all it is put the file in place and click upgrade. Just click the button. That's literally all it is. So it's been, so I mean, after really the first time where it worked, I don't think we had virtual machines running yet, so we weren't as worried about it, being impactful, but we just kind of gained trust through everyone to where the NFS timeouts, it was delayed enough that it nothing broke. NFS didn't
Right.
time out, didn't have to it just reconnected when we were done. And yeah, so the more recent stuff you guys have done with the containerized updates and just those have been so fast. I like nothing even notices, like literally, when we put VMs on, that changed things a little because there's a lot of timeouts in like the backend store. And if the VM can't reach its disk, it's not real happy, and we have a lot of highly available systems set up in there too.
Right.
But like I said, most of these updates they're hitless. I mean, they're non-disruptive.
That's great.
So
that's great. That's great. Yeah, I asked about it because it's one of the central sort of value propositions for the product is that you buy what you pay on day one is the same thing you pay at the end, but along the way it's getting better all the time because it's software. But that only works if the upgrade experience is pleasant enough that you're willing to do it, as opposed to what your previous storage. So okay, one last question, and then I'll take you off the hot seat here. As a product leader at Qumulo, it's part of my job to make sure we are always understanding what customers like you want in the future, so that we're building the right stuff here. And then I'd love to even with some of our prospects on the call here, give you a chance to talk about the future. What would you love to see Qumulo do next? What problems at the university could we help you solve as a storage provider?
Yeah, I think some of the really, you guys really almost hit everything that we need. Some things that we're looking to do down the road, we're getting into a lot more, I guess, restricted computing environments and a lot more compliance and PHI and HIPAA compliance. There'll probably be actually a project coming here at the university in research computing that will probably want a separate file system that has all these kind of controls. And I think we're probably not alone in that, really. So future-wise, I think security is going to be a huge thing.
Yeah.
Whether I know you guys offer encryption already, so that that would be useful. But anything in that space that can allow us to safely and be compliant and store that type of data. I mean, I don't know how these guys in the medical field are already doing it. If they're using Qumulo today, maybe there's other controls they're putting around the outside, but those are definitely the things we're hearing about now.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I should say for everybody on the call, we definitely have lots of HIPAA compliant customers that use us all the time. So there's definitely absolutely ways to use Qumulo in those environments. And we actually have our product is it's FIPS under test right now. So we're our software is under test with a FIPS and common criteria vendor, which is one of the ways you prove the security of your products. But man, I got to tell you, it's just about every customer I talk to these days, the first thing out of their mouth is security. And we hear it all over the place. We've got a bunch of people working on a variety of security features, but I think that the whether it's ransomware or just increased standards, it is such an important thing, and it's clearly very important to Qumulo too. So great feedback, great idea. Hey, Pascal, I think it might be time for you to come on in, and as Eric and I sign off, I just want to say, Eric, a huge thank you to you. Thank you for spending the time with us and talking about Qumulo, but also more importantly, thank you for being an awesome customer.
No problem. So, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Pascal, I think now would be an awesome moment for you to take everybody here through a tour of the product itself. What is this thing?
All right. Thank you, Ben. I'm going to share my screen. All right. So, hi, everyone. My name is Pascal, systems engineer here at Qumulo. In today's demo, I'm going to show you how to create an AWS cluster, Qumulo cluster in AWS, fail our on-premise Qumulo cluster to the AWS cluster, and finally fail back from our AWS cluster back to our on-premise cluster. All right, so logging into our AWS console, taking a quick look, just want to show you that we do not have any systems or clusters running in the cloud beforehand. The way we create our cluster in this demo is I'm going to fire up a Terraform script with all of the steps involved to automatically stage the cluster in the cloud. So launching my script right now. This will take a while. We can just go take a look back in our AWS console. Hit refresh, and we see that we have the cluster creation in progress. If I take a quick look at my script is running. All right, process completed. I have a brand new cluster, so I'll just log into my Qumulo dashboard, copy paste credentials, log in. Excellent. So as Ben has mentioned, it's always very easy to use, super simple. I just wanted to show you in this dashboard that we have our Qumulo AWS cluster running, no files, no directories. It's a 4 nodes cluster, but it is completely empty. If I go under sharing, SMB shares, we have a default share called files. It is sharing our root directory. And one final step, which is usually a good practice, I'll go ahead and just change the local admin password credentials from the default password. Security, you can never be too sure. So I'll just change the password right now, hit save. All right. So back into my Windows client. Now that we have a Qumulo cluster running inside of AWS, I will connect to it using the remote IP. Just hit copy. So I'll connect to it inside of File Explorer / IP address via the SMB protocol. I will authenticate with our local admin account. All right, so we have one file share. If I look into files, it is currently empty. I will also be connecting to our on-premise cluster via File Explorer. So I will open up a File Explorer window. Same process, so / DNS name of our on-premise cluster. I will authenticate to that cluster to connect. Excellent. So we have 2 shares. If we look into files, 2 folders, one named NFS, one named SMB. If I go ahead and log into our on-premise cluster, so here we have the dashboard. It has been pre-staged with some data so that we would have something to show you with the replication engine. So files and directories are in there. Excellent. So next step, we will want to go ahead and create a replication relationship. I'll go ahead and create relationship. The relationship goes from a source directory path to a target directory path. In this case, we'll just use root as an example. I will need my target IP from the Qumulo AWS cluster. Copy and paste. And I will just need to hit save relationship. All right, so we now have a replication relationship created. It is asking for authorization on the destination cluster. If I hit see details, this is where I can click authorize to authorize the request. And as soon as I click authorize, if I look at the replication relationship, it will start replicating. It is super quick. It is our own replication engine, block to block asynchronous. If I hit replication, the view details, I can see live what is currently transferring, replicating from between both clusters. Excellent. So taking a look back at both of my shares or both of my clusters, I can see that both folders have now replicated over to the DR cluster inside of AWS. So NFS and SMB are in there. If I try and copy, so I do have some data on my desktop inside of the Windows client. So if I try and copy a folder over to my DR cluster, so just drag a folder up to the DR cluster, it will fail. And that's the intended behavior. So a DR cluster is always in read-only, and that is expected. However, if I drag the same folder to my on-premise cluster, I'll be able to write to it in a normal fashion. So as is the harsh reality of IT, I'll just show you. So replication is going on right now. So we will just wait a bit for the replication engine to do its job. And our new folder will be synced, replicated to our DR cluster. Excellent. So I was going to mention harsh reality of IT. Things do usually fail. So what I will do right now is simulate an emergency by shutting down our cluster live. So I'll be shutting down our on-premise cluster to simulate a trouble going on site, on-premise. If I take a look at both of my shares, as expected, the on-premise cluster is no longer responding, and the DR cluster inside of AWS is still responding properly. Okay, so we now want to, once that our main site is down, we now want to go ahead and be able to work on our DR cluster. So first step is to make our DR cluster writable. So I'll go ahead and make the target writable. If I take a folder now and drag and drop it to my DR cluster inside of AWS, I will be able to write to it. So a copy has started. Of course, it is a lot slower because I'm going through the internet all over to the cluster in the cloud. And this is only a demo system. Going back to my dashboard. So we have worked on our emergency. I will bring our on-premise cluster back online. So on-premise cluster is back online. While all of this is going on, I'll just let the copy progress in the background. So it's now disconnected and our target is writable, target being the AWS DR cluster. So what can we do if we want to flip the workflow back to our on-premise cluster? So take our traffic and bring it back to our on-premise cluster. I will need to reverse our relationship. So, okay, copy has completed. I will go ahead and reverse our replication relationship from our DR AWS cluster back to our on-premise cluster. I will just need to go ahead and copy paste that our on-premise IP address in there, reverse relationship. Our relationship has been reversed. We are still disconnected, so I will have to hit or reconnect our replication relationship. So I will just hit reconnect. Once again, from the AWS cluster to the on-premise cluster. We can see that both were writable right now. I will reconnect. One of them will become read-only. Taking a look back at our Windows desktop, our on-premise cluster now contains our new Twister folder, which I had copied over on the DR cluster while our main site was down. So we can see that the replication engine is doing its job, replicating always super quickly, asynchronous, block by block. And once again, the last step to come back to what normality is to reverse relationship back from on-premise to AWS on our DR cluster once everything is back to normal. So I'll just go ahead and hit reverse relationship. And the final step will be to reconnect our replication relationship. So on-premise is writable and our DR cluster is read-only as we had started. So that's it. That's how easy it is to create a cluster inside of AWS. Use it as a DR cluster. You could use it for many other uses, but in this case, we're using it for DR. Fail over to our DR site and then fail back to our on-premise cluster. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Pascal. I think we have a few minutes for some questions, and I know the team was active during the session answering a lot of the questions that came in. So thank you for that. We do have a couple more, and also feel free to add additional questions for the team as we go through some that we're going to go over now. So the first question, Pascal, you showed replication and failover, failback for an on-premises cluster to the cloud. Is the process any different if this was a cloud to cloud or an on-prem to an on-prem?
So process is the same. It's always, as Ben has mentioned, it's the same code and same product running on all of our platforms. So it makes it really simple to use and to be creative as an IT professional. So you could do an on-premise to on-premise replication, on-premise to cloud. You could do multi-cloud replication if you wanted to. You define a source, you define a target. It could be the whole volume, or it could be only a simple filter. So you can get very creative in your DR scenario or even backup scenario.
That's great. Thank you. Second question, does all the data need to be re-replicated in a failover, failback scenario?
No, so it's only a delta. So once you create a replication relationship, it is going block by block, but of course we'll be transferring only the changed bits. So it's still always super efficient, either on-premise or between on-premise and cloud. So that's why the replication was so quick in our demo. It's just replicating what's needed and what's left to replicate.
Thank you. And last one, you spoke about this as a DR example. Can replication on Qumulo also be used for more of a backup scenario?
Yeah, so DR is a full-fledged, this is the best example of running a cluster in the cloud. However, we do have snapshots, which are super efficient as well. So we could be used as a in a kind of backup scenario where you could leverage snapshots on top of replication for sure.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Those are all the questions that we have for today, and we're ending a little bit early, which is great. I want to thank all of our speakers for your time, especially Eric. Thank you so much for joining you and being a great partner for Qumulo. Again, we will, this session was recorded, so we will send you via email the on-demand link. So feel free to share it with your peers and friends. And also you will be receiving your Uber Eats voucher as well. So thank you again, and please reach out if we can answer any other questions you may have. Thank you.